playtime at this miniature goat property near Victor Harbour in South Australia. And it's hard not to crack a smile when these kids test out their young limbs.
When I initially came across this breed, I just fell in love with the personality. They were the most gentle, loving, funny, playful little balls of joy. Come on, monsters! Come on!
It's certainly a change of pace and proportions for Megan Miller, who was raised on a farm that bred Murray Grey cattle. She decided to downsize her stock after moving to a smaller block with her husband.
Leave me hanging.
What did your dad think about your move into miniature goat?
Oh, honey. Oh, he thought I was insane. Initially, honestly, he didn't know what I was doing. He didn't know what these things were, what value they had. He wasn't a huge fan.
What started with a couple of minis has now escalated into a herd of about 40, a figure that jumps again at kidding time. So this is like the highlight of my day, holding this little bundle. But miniatures don't stay this small, do they?
Sadly not. They get a little bit bigger than that. This lady here is about 3.5. Her name is Sienna. So she's about 53.5 centimetres. The does can get up to 57 centimetres though, and the bucks are slightly larger at about 60.
So how much smaller are these ones than, say, a standard goat?
Standard goats can be anything up to 70 centimetres plus, particularly for your bigger dairy breeds, Nubians, boar goats, those kind of things. So you really see the size difference when you start standing them up against each other.
There are several breeds of miniature goats in the country. This is the homegrown one, the Australian miniature. It's been developed over 20 years using both feral and purebred animals. Has the focus of the breeding then been on selecting for smallness?
Definitely on size and temperament.
Does that have any negative effects on the health of the animal or the strength of the animal?
Not necessarily. If you're basing those decisions, and this is where breeders come into their own, if you're a good breeder and the element of showing and things all comes together, you've got to breed for structure.
Many breeders head to agricultural shows to see just how good they are.
Typically you'll be looking for masculinity for a buck. I think we've got the one buck in this class today, so that's what they'll be looking at for here. Nice.
The Royal Adelaide show proves a winner for Megan Miller.
Bring yours up, please.
Her herd walks away with a swag of ribbons and titles, including Best Miniature Goat.
They're proportionate, they're feminine, they're refined.
And with form comes function.
I like working with the aspect that they could be used as a dairy animal, particularly working on those udders, the attachments. I want them to be a downscaled version of a full-sized goat in every capacity, so they need to be functional.
Do a big circle all the way around me. I know he's not cooperating, is he?
But for most breeders, the main money right now is in the pet market. The size and easy handling,
Try and keep him in line like this.
well, relatively easy, makes these pint-sized performers an appealing package.
The does, pet quality, you might pick up one for about $400 to $500, but some of those quality does, the really good high-grade does, they're $750 plus, well over $1,000.
Come on, number 90. Off you go. Not over there.
Near Narracourt in the southeast of South Australia is another little breed of livestock attracting a fan club with its stocky body, woolly socks and wrinkly teddy bear features. These are baby dolls, which are small Southdown sheep.
Most of the inquiries that I get for Southdown, for the baby doll Southdowns, are people who are genuinely wanting to have them in vineyards or to have them on a smaller acreage. And I think there's definitely a trend now around the cities for people to want to live a more rural lifestyle. Daisy!
For breeder Dee Nolan, these cute characters are also helping her reconnect with the land and livestock she loved as a kid.
Oh, we got a little jump, hey? Good girl. when you grow up on a farm, you always think you're a farmer. And I've always thought that I'm sort of Dee Nolan from Gun Park. There's always been a sort of bit of my brain like that. But coming back to farm sheep has been, you know, a real learning curve because I've been away sort of doing something completely different for all these decades. I'm also surrounded by really, really good sheep farmers who I've discovered are incredibly discreet because they must have been looking over the fence over the last few years thinking, oh my goodness, what's she doing now?
Sheep farming is certainly a world away from Dee Nolan's previous life. The journalist and editor spent much of it running high-profile newspapers and magazines in London and New York, where she moved in influential circles. But she never forgot her rural roots, eventually buying back the family property with her husband John and turning it into an integrated organic farm with olive groves and livestock.
So I bought some first cross sheep and these huge sheep arrived. I hadn't realised since I was kind of growing up on the farm that sheep had become so big. And so, of course, they ate way too much of the trees, so that didn't work. And then I thought, well, I remember when I was a kid, I really loved our Southdown sheep. And they were kid-sized sheep. They were, you know, these little short to the ground, all sheep. And I went in search of them.
What she found was the Southdown, which is known for its meat quality, had also been upsized. But there were a few remnant flocks of the original, smaller sheep. So what have we got here?
We've got the baby doll and we've got the modern Southdown, so the two sizes of Southdown that are now around.
And the main difference seems from back here seems to be in the leg height?
Difference in the leg height and the body length.
They're a lot longer there, aren't they?
Crazy as it sounds, this one over here may not weigh that much less than this one here.
He's very stocky. She now breeds modern Southdowns to sell to prime lamb producers, while also building up her baby doll flock more for the pet market.
I would guess there's probably no more than a couple of hundred of baby doll Southdowns in Australia at the moment, because they very nearly did die out completely. And it's wonderful that they're being saved. Come on, there we go.
It's not the most glamorous career change, but raising and caring for these little livestock is nourishing more than a niche industry.
That's it. Your turn next. I'm in the shed, the birthing shed, some nights, sort of feeding lambs that, you know, mum's having problems with at 10 o'clock, just sort of smiling to myself, thinking 20 years ago I was kind of out in my glad rags at a gala dinner or the Oscars or wherever after a long day in the office. So, yeah, it's a complete change, but in a way it just feels so natural, my life, having come full circle and being back on the farm where I grew up.
Mac, shush.
In the Gippsland region of Victoria is another breeder who also farms large and little, this time cattle.
Hey, hips.
These are miniature Herefords which come from England. And like baby doll Southdowns, they're a return to the original rather than something new.
Way back when the Hereford breed was developed, they were more of an animal about this size. When they went to America, they started breeding bigger and bigger animals. Everything got bigger and bigger, and we ended up with something more like this.
But one family in the US did the opposite, focusing on the little livestock. And that was the start of the miniature Herefords. Alison Livermore is one of around 20 breeders in Australia.
That's a good girl. You like that, don't you, Rosebud? Hey?
She got into the smaller cattle when she lived on a small property and stuck with them when she moved to a larger farm because of the demand.
Come on. Good girl.
While the term miniature may be overstating it a bit, she says the more compact animal is appealing because it's easier on the land as well as the handler.
They don't pug up the ground as much. You can run more cattle per acre than the bigger animal, and they drink a lot less water, and they're a robust, sturdy little animal, so they do very well.
There are actually more than 50 breeds of smaller cattle around the world. As well as the miniature Hereford in Australia, some of the more common ones are the Australian Lowline, which was developed here and is basically a small Angus, the Irish Dexter, and these miniature Galloways, which come from Scotland. With their long double coat and striking faces, it's easy to see why the smaller version of this very old breed is an appealing prospect. Most are sold as companion animals, but there's also growing interest in what's beyond the good looks and gentle temperament.
A few wineries have approached me about some of them for meat, and I think that puzzled me a little bit, but I think some people now are going away from the big, huge T-bone, but they still want a T-bone. So obviously these T-bones are slightly smaller, but just as flavoursome.
Jeff Williams was introduced to the breed when he ran an aviation company in Scotland. In his retirement, he's now turned his hand to running a miniature Galloway business near Mount Barker in the Adelaide Hills, where 9-month-old calves fetch between $1,800 and $2,500.
Investment worth return is clearly they in front. I mean, yes, they've got to have, water and they've got to have a paddock, but, that's where it sort of stops. They're not into that sort of huge amounts of veterinary bills.
There we go.
So it's not just a case of, popping them in a paddock and leaving them, alone.
No, not quite. These guys, they are still livestock. They've got different needs, different requirements. You certainly can't just have these in a residential yard. They're for 1/4 of an acre or up.
Warnings aside, producers of these diminutive animals are optimistic about the future. Whether it's the creation of a new breed or the revival of an old one, it appears as lifestyles change, there's a place for livestock of all shapes and sizes.